Hello and welcome back to my channel, Saying Yes to Life. I'm Delisa Renideo and I'm coming to you from Vilcabamba, Ecuador. So welcome to my garden. Have you ever wondered who you would be if you were born in a different place or a different time or just to different parents? I've definitely wondered that. In fact, I wonder it quite a bit while I'm living here in Ecuador, because here I am landed in a completely different culture. And of course, we have a different language, which changes everything for me, and different foods and clothing and customs. The music is different, different religions, different holidays. And so, have you imagined that maybe you could have been born, perhaps in Japan? That would be very different, wouldn't it? If you were from the Western countries. Or maybe you're born in India, where they sit on the floor and eat with their hands. And to us, that might seem like so strange. But whatever we grow up with is what feels normal and natural and right. Those of us who grew up in North America, I grew up in the United States, we could look at something like people sitting on the floor to eat with their hands. I was like, well, why are they doing that? And I can remember actually seeing some pictures of the food that they had at the markets for in China, and all kinds of odd looking creatures, odd to me with my North American cultural bias, and thinking, oh my goodness, how could they eat these funny looking animals with spines and all kinds of things? And I realized, of course, if they were to look at the food that I grew up with, it would seem just as abnormal and maybe appalling to them. So I think it's kind of a helpful thing to do, to actually consider, what would it be like to be born in another time or another place or in another family? And we take walks every day in our neighborhood and walk our dogs and say hello to the people, and they're so friendly. And we don't have much of a conversation, but it's, hola, buenos dias, ¿cómo está? And, we're friendly back and forth. And sometimes they say a lot more and we don't know how to answer them. But there's a friendly camaraderie because we have seen each other on this in the same area at the same time of day. And there's something very universal that's connecting us, even though we don't understand each other's language, and we do have very different customs. But when we realize that no matter where we grow up, that's what's going to feel normal and natural and right. And of course, what that means is that when we see the way other people are living, we may feel surprised or even appalled, and not too unlikely, maybe very judgmental. How could they even do that? How could they eat that kind of stuff? We may feel very superior and even righteous, or maybe envious. But if you imagine that you were born there, then that would just feel normal and right. We don't have to go to the other part of the world to really think about how different it could be if we were born into a different family. So just imagine that you were born into a different family in the same country, maybe even in the same town. Who would you be if you were born into a different time, a different place, with different parents? So much of our identity is based on where we were born. And as far as we know, we didn't have any say in where we were born. I do know that there are belief systems that say we do choose our parents. We do choose when we're born and where we're born. And I actually don't know if that's true or not. Because where I grew up, it seemed normal to think that we just show up in a family and then that's what we are born to. One of the things that is the most, well, there's two things that really strike me as important for us to think about this. And one of them is religion, because I was born into a country that was basically Christian. And there were people with different beliefs within this, but that's the norm. And yet, if I'd been born into a Muslim country or a Hindu country, I would have completely different values. And so, whose are right? Are mine right because this is where I was born? And so they're wrong? That doesn't make any sense to me. What if I were born there? So the same thing is true of our patriotism, the wars that we have. We're fighting against somebody because of where they were born. Does that make any sense? That doesn't make sense to me. So what I've come up with as I'm thinking about this is that maybe instead of looking at the differences in how we were brought up and the differences of our belief systems, maybe we can look for what is universal in all of these different cultures. For instance, we all care for our children. We take care of our kids. We feed our kids. We share love with our families and our friends. Every culture shows kindness to others that they care for. We all have a desire to be safe. We all have a desire to have enough food, enough shelter, enough of what's necessary for life. And we all have that universal feeling of gratitude when we do have what we need and when we can see the beauty around us. And I think it's also universal for us to have faith in something. Now, what we choose to have faith in is very different from one culture to another. But I think having faith is one of those universal um, qualities that goes way beyond what country we live in or what language we speak. And these are certainly very obvious to me here. Now, some of the differences are actually so fascinating that I would never trade this opportunity to see how other people do celebrate holidays, for instance. One of the funny ones, funny to me because I didn't grow up here, is something that they do here during, I don't think it's for Christmas, I think it's for New Year's. They make an effigy of themselves, they make a dummy, and they decorate it, paint their faces, they put on clothes of their own clothes, and then they burn them. And sometimes they'll burn them out in the street and jump over the fire. And that seems very strange to me, but I find it very interesting and fascinating. And I think if we can accept that these differences make our lives more interesting, and we can just be curious about them. And then to look for the universal qualities. And that's what we see now when we walk our dogs and we wave at the other people that are going by, taking their children to school or going to work or walking with their dogs. So I just invite you to look at the others in in your life, those who may live across town from you. Maybe they live on the other side of the planet. Maybe they live under your own roof and have very different ways of thinking and being. And I just ask you and me, all of us, to consider others with curiosity, with respect, with compassion, and with gratitude, because each one of us are creating this most interesting and mysterious experience of life. And then if something surprises us or even appalls us, just consider, what if I had been born there, in that place, in that time, to those parents? And I think that we could all live with a whole lot more joy and a whole lot more peace if we can practice those kinds of attitudes. So thank you for joining me here today. I hope you'll have some fun with this and just play that pretend game. What if I had been born there? And I hope you'll join me next time. I'll be with you again in just a few more days.